Do you spend most of your days running around chasing fires, solving problems that somebody else could have solved, fixing things, dealing with crisis, and reacting with things mindlessly instead of mindfully?
So if you're like most leaders, you're looking at running around mindlessly. And in today's session, we're going to try and help you learn 3 ways that you can take time to pause, put on the brakes, and work more from a mindful standpoint so that you can get out of crisis management and into a more proactive leadership style. Hi, I'm Bill. That's Kathy. And to start this session off, I'd like to tell you a little bit of a story about a client of mine who I was recently working with. We were working together on a project. It was a very time-sensitive project. And I'm sitting in her office with her, and we're working away, and all of a sudden she goes, "Damn, I've got another appointment. Let me just text the person. I'll let that person know that I can't be there." And just as she's finishing the text, she hits sends and her phone rings. And she says, "Oh, just a minute. I'll just answer this call and I'll get back to you." And all I hear is her side of the conversation, and it goes something like this. "Hi. Oh, no, really? Today? Right now? I thought that was next week. You mean she's waiting for me now? Oh my God. Thanks for letting me know." And she hangs up. She turns to me and she says, "I hate to do this, but I've got to go. I know this is important, what we're working on, but the thing that I have to go to right now is even more important." My friend Marie, not her real name, by the way, had triple booked herself. This is a woman who is meticulous, who believes that she's got her day absolutely wrapped up in a nice little bow, but she was not only working for herself, but because it was a time where lots of people were away on vacation, senior leadership for the most part, she was doing the work of 4 senior leaders.
Well, and I think that happens all the time in organizations. If we look across the board, I mean, just think about your job right now. You're not just doing the job that you thought you were stepping into. You're doing the job for you, the person that's on maternity leave, the person that doesn't do their job and you're cleaning up their messes. You're probably doing some of the work for the person above you because we know that they don't do what they're supposed to do either and they delegate it downwards. So you're doing all of this stuff. And what's happening is you're spending most of your days in reactive mode instead of being able to proactively deal with things. Bill and I dealt with this all the time in our work when we were in organizations. And in reality, Bill, we still deal with it today to some degree.
Oh, absolutely. I think that the issue is for people that work has gotten so much more complex than it ever has been. And it's so difficult to get the clarity you need when you're constantly putting out fires and dealing with crisis after crisis.
And when do you get the clarity? Let me guess. For most of us, it's in the shower, when I'm driving. We have those moments of like, oh, I got it. And it's like, man, I wish I had more of those. I wish I had more of that time for like everything to just be quiet and let me think about this or reflect on this or contemplate or just like let it, percolate. We don't have those times very often.
Yeah, and when you rarely get those moments of brilliance is when you're in the middle of a crisis.
Yeah.
Because everything that the brain science tells us is that we actually narrow in. We get much more narrow around the possible choices that we have available to us, which makes sense. If you feel that you're pressed for time, do you really want to have to consider this many ideas, or do you want to consider that many ideas? Yeah. Because you're going to get through the crisis much quicker if you have fewer ideas to consider. And what happens if one of the better ideas doesn't happen to be in that narrow little window?
Yeah, well, and, I can think of some other examples too. I know a client that I have right now who has to make a decision about whether she's going to take on this new role. And this new role is around, it's part of her job, but it's around sitting on a board of another sort of, we all have boards we're being asked to sit on, provincial organizations, this committee, this little project we all have those opportunities to work on those things. And she has to decide whether she's going to take that opportunity. And it's a good move strategically for her organization. but it's also going to eat up a lot of her time. Now, if she's trying to make that decision, like, in the middle of having this phone call, running to this meeting, she's not going to think about it in a broader perspective. Again, she's going to think really narrow. And yet, if she can cultivate some time to reflect and ponder, she'll see things, like you said, that weren't there before, perhaps.
Yeah. I don't think we want to keep people in suspense, Kathy. We promised them 3 ways that they could, find ways to actively pause. And isn't that a funny phraseology, right? Actively pause. But to put the brakes on and take the time to reflect and be proactive.
So, share number 1. Actually, share all 3, and then we'll go deeper into them. How about that?
That sounds great.
All right.
So,
go ahead.
All right, I'll share number 1. So number 1 is schedule it in. Actually set time in your diary to take time to stop, reflect, and really give some time for the thinking part of leadership.
And then number 2 is to create a routine. It's not that you just need to do it a one-time thing. You need to create the habit of doing this regular reflection.
And the third one is to use existing time. And many of us already do that. Kathy mentioned, some of the best ideas I personally get are in the shower. Other places that you can use the time for is when you're commuting. When you have that 45-minute drive back home to home from the office, to turn off the radio and use that opportunity to really think about how the day's gone and how you want it to go.
And okay, so let's talk about number 1 again, scheduling it in. Why do people not schedule reflective time in, Bill?
I think because they don't feel they have the time. The paradox here is that in order to speed up, sometimes we have to slow down. But it's interesting. I had a student of mine in one of the courses that I do just recently say that he was going to schedule in 30 minutes on Wednesdays. He was going to try this out because he'd heard me talk about this need to pause as a leader. And so he's going to go for a walk, he tells me, on Wednesdays for half an hour, and he's going to use that time to reflect on how the week's gone so far and what he'd like to accomplish before the week's done. And so he's actively put that in his diary for a certain time of day on Wednesdays to do it.
Well, and the sort of metaphor that we talked about was driving. If you just keep driving and you're like, pedal to the metal, and you keep going and you get lost, which is basically what we're doing in leadership half the time is we're lost, and you keep going, you're just going to get yourself deeper into the, edge of town where you don't want to be, or the center of town where you don't want to be, or down some, one-way street. But if you pause and, check your GPS, phone and get clarity on directions, whatever it is you need to do, you're going to be better able to then regroup and start on a fresher, more mindful journey. And so the part about scheduling it in is a mindset shift. It's that paradox. I don't have time to do this. And you just have to shift that to, I do have time, I'm creating time, it's going to help me, it's going to move things along better.
Well, and I think one other thing I'd add to that is that it's important for me to schedule the time, right? And not only for me, because quite often leaders really are self-sacrificers, it's important to your people. Because one of the ways that you can use this scheduling of time for yourself is to find ways to grow your people. For instance, having them make decisions that they bring to you instead of you taking the decision yourself. If you have the opportunity to say, look, when John comes to me with that particular decision, I'm going to mentor him in such a way that he can start to make those on his own without coming to me. Creating space for yourself for other things.
Well, and I guess the other thing, so when we're talking about creating a routine, in my book, I list a whole bunch of ways like setting timers and doing that kind of stuff. But what you were just saying, Bill, I think one of the things that we think about when we think about pausing or reflection is daydreaming. That's not necessarily what we're talking about. And some people do, like sit, put your feet up, stare out the window, whatever it is you want to do, go for a walk. Like those are powerful ways to do that. But it can also be an activity. So maybe it's a sheet. I encouraged people this week to write down the list of their top 3 staff that they supervise and identify their strengths that you're growing in them. That's a pause. That's an opportunity to stop the day-to-day, putting out fires, and it's an activity that helps you pause. So that's another way to think about it, is doing that reflective work in a different way.
Yeah. Well, that's a nice transition too, Kathy, from scheduling into our second way, which is to create a routine. And maybe you can start by telling folks what you see the difference being between those two.
Okay, so if I schedule it in on Monday, like your student said he was scheduling it in, he might schedule it in this Wednesday, but next Wednesday he might get busy. And he might, again, mindlessly go, I'll do it next week. But you have to create the routine. So part of creating that routine is communicating it to the people around you. It's putting it in your calendar. And when somebody says, can we book something here? You saying, no, I'm sorry, we can't. That's an appointment. When it becomes a routine, you do it habitually, and you probably even look forward to it. One-off is great, but that's not what we're necessarily talking about. That might be a starting point. But we want you to do it habitually, whether that's 5 minutes a day, 15 minutes a week, every Saturday morning, whatever it is, whatever kind of process you develop, but do it on a regular basis again and again.
And I think that the way to do it too is to make sure you're doing it in a time frame that works for you.
Yes.
There's no point in saying I'm going to do this on a daily basis when you know that daily is virtually impossible.
Yeah.
So find the right time frame for yourself, the right place, and that's part of the routine as well. So I have a feeling, because I know this guy likes to walk and enjoys nature, that's a good setting for him.
Yes.
And so that's part of the routine as well. Is what's the setting that I'm going to be comfortable in? How is it going to feel like it's part of my daily or my monthly or whatever it is routine that I'm going to be able to stick with.
Yeah, I used to walk on the dike when I was in an organization, and again, my staff knew that I was heading out at lunch to do that, and that was part of that, just, taking off everything that had happened already, letting everything sift and catch up. So then the last one, that using existing time, there are so many opportunities for us, podcasts and audiobooks, and listen to CBC radio, and when you get home at the end of the day, you're filling it with catching up on your Netflix binge or whatever it is. And what we're saying is there's lots of times where you have that opportunity to just pause. Maybe you're at a meeting and it hasn't started yet. Well, don't pick up your phone and check Facebook. Just stop and go, you can have a room full around you. It doesn't mean that you have to, like I say, daydream and roll your eyes back and put your feet on the desk. It can simply be just going, geez, what just happened at that meeting this morning? Like, I felt like something was off, and, what went on, and just let it sit. Again, you're cooking supper at night. Sometimes that's the opportunity to go, we have staff meeting tomorrow, and I'm trying to kind of think about something creative to do. What could I do tomorrow? And just not turn on the TV, not, turn on the podcast or whatever it is you're doing, but just have a little bit of quiet reflection.
Yeah, and I think that when we stop and think, there are so many of those possible times, and they can be as simple as, standing in that long line at the warehouse grocery store that we all go to, and it could be, in the shower. Like for me, that's a great one. Yeah. And I've actually got a pen and paper in the bedroom and went off and try and write things down afterwards. Yeah. So, whatever it is that tends to work for you, it might be after you've dropped your kids off at the soccer practice and, they're out there running around the field and you're there watching them. And you have your eye on them, but at the same time, you have an opportunity for reflection.
That's a great example, Bill, because here's the reality. We don't shut off from work as much as we should. And my guess is what most people are doing is checking their email for the 20th time and getting madder about it again for the 20th time. They already read it at 8 o'clock this morning. And so when we're talking about reflecting, one of the things I was saying to Bill earlier that many of us do is regurgitate. We take that same frustration and anger and we just, wind it up, and we tell our friend about it, and we complain to our spouse about it, and like I said, we open the email 20 times and read it again. We're saying, let go of the phone, put it down. Maybe grab a piece of paper and a pen and write some thoughts down. But thinking forward rather than staying where you are. That's the whole point about mindful reflection, is we're wanting you to start thinking about what's going on and what the challenges are for part of that, but most of that we want you to be thinking about where is it that I want to go and what do I need to do to get there. Not what does everybody else around me need to do to get there, but what do I need to do differently to get where it is we want to go.
So one of our goals for this time with you is to keep it to about 15 minutes, because we'd love for this to be something that you can feel comfortable spending that amount of time with us to do. So let us summarize. We're saying that, in order to deal with things more proactively, there are at least three ways that you can find time to pause. Schedule it in, develop a routine, and use existing time that's available to you, like commuting or being in the shower, for time to reflect. And here's a bit of a teaser. All of this requires that you become curious.
Yes. And
so we're going to talk to you about curiosity in perhaps our next Facebook Live event. And of course, if you haven't had a chance to see this live, it'll be in our video vault.
There you go. So yes, just a side note, we are on YouTube, so we put these videos all on YouTube. So pop on over to YouTube and subscribe those videos as well. Share this video so that we can start to share this message. I think if you found it valuable, share it in your feed, share it at work with the people that you find need to hear this message as well. And just if you like Bill and I, just give us a like, give us some comments, ask us some questions. Even though if you're watching us on the replay, we will pop in and answer questions without a doubt. So thank you for tuning in. And I think that's all, Bill?
That's it for now.
All right. Bye-bye.
Bye.